Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the meeting of the Boston Borough Council Corporate Community Overview and Scrutiny Committee. My name is Paul Gleeson and I'm Chairman of the committee, and Councillor Susan Welbury is my Vice Chairman. Firstly, our housekeeping rules are as follows. Restroom facilities are available for the ladies on this floor and for the gentlemen halfway down the main stairwell. In the event of a fire alarm, officers escort everyone to the fire point in the car park. This meeting is being streamed live, and as such, please may I ask all persons addressing this meeting to do so through their microphones. Please be advised that abuse or intimidation of any kind will not be tolerated. Anyone who is deemed to breach this requirement will be warned and asked to refrain. If the behaviour persists, they will be asked to leave the meeting. The first item of the agenda is to receive apologies for absence and notice of substitutions, if any.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Patsy Marsden, with Councillor Salmiecki substituting. Also have further apologies from Councillor Chris Fountain and Councillor Helen Staples. No substitute members for those two. Thank you.
And the next item would be to sign the minutes of the previous meeting. Do I have your agreement to sign these, please?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, the amendment to table Councillor Evans' apologies has been made to the copy I'm signing.
Right.
And the incorrect personage for Councillor Arthur will be confirmed in the minute that are on the website.
Thank you.
Do I have members of commission? Thank you. Receive any written questions from members of the public? Oh, sorry, off the line. Receive any declarations of interest in respect to any item on this agenda? Does any member have any declarations of interest? Receive any written questions from members of the public?
No questions, Chairman.
Thank you. This concludes the preliminary items, and now we'll move to part 2 of the agenda. Our first item this evening is the Council's Partnership Communication Strategy. This is on page 3 of the agenda, and was presented by the portfolio holder, Councillor Andorian, and supported by Sean Gibbons, our communication manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so in the spirit of how we want scrutiny to proceed, we are looking tonight for your comments, which will be taken on board and included, we hope, in this new communication strategy. This is a partnership-wide strategy, and we are beginning to develop these now as the partnership progresses on its path. So I've picked out some things from the report to highlight to you. As you know, the partnership was formed in October 2021, and since then there have been various teams working together informally, and for some departments that had to become regulated and on a more formal basis, and Sean was made the service manager for communications. Yeah, thank you. So he leads the comms team. Now the team have been working informally, and a good example of when that benefited our council as well as the other two partner councils was, for instance, when the Queen passed away, and there was things were moving at pace, and there were constant changes being made, coming out from the palace, coming out from number 10, and the comms team were very much at the heart of that work, which enabled us all to present a very sad but a very smooth public face for our local residents. So Sean has been working hard on this delivery plan, and he's already taken it through East Lindsay's scrutiny panel, and now it will come to us and South Holland. It's clearly been set out what he's going to do, how he's going to do it, and then how he's going to measure what he's done, what he and his team have done. So I picked out, I must also comment that this is a public facing document. So it will be on our website. Our residents will be able to hold us to account that we are delivering on what we promised. So I picked out some items that I want to draw your attention to, but of course you'll all have read your documents and you may have your own comments to make. I'm going to draw your attention first of all to page 13. And the item I've picked out for you is that it's around the training. We've all had our media training, but I just wanted to reassure you that that was an ongoing offer from Sean and his team, and he can offer very specific and specialised training for those of you that want it or need it. I've also want to indicate that the team will act as a single point of contact for officers and members. So everything that we do or say in the media, we should always seek the guidance of our experts. Moving on from there, I want to go to page 14. With that. And I will take your questions now or later, Chair, to suit. It's important on page 14 that we're going to get monthly evaluation reports. We're not going to leave this 6 months or a year before we decide if what we're doing is working or not. So that is an important aspect of the strategy, and one that I don't think, if it does happen now, it certainly doesn't come across my desk. But so I think that's important. The third bullet point down, I've already made annotated mission, which I think is that we share success stories with staff, and I think we should also share those with members, if you're happy to include that. And then the last bullet point there highlights the fact that we're going to conduct an annual resident satisfaction survey, and that way we'll be able to benchmark against LGA standards how well we are doing. And that's important because the public play a big part in the strategy. If you're happy with that, we'll move on to page 16. This is something that I feel really passionate about, and that I spoke to Sean about in great detail. I've spoke to the Chief Executive about it, which is the third paragraph down. And that is that our communications team must become part of our decision-making process. So my experience has been, we think about comms after we've developed a really good piece of work, and then when we're ready to go live with it or share it with the members of the public, suddenly, oh, what about comms? What are they going to do? When in actual fact, they have a real valid role to play from the inception of a project to guide us all the way through and help shape how that project is going to be presented to each other and to members of the public. Following on from there, I've highlighted page 18. And I'm picking out bits I think are most relevant to yourselves, and that either I picked up an edit or that I think is interesting. Please feel free to cover the bits I haven't. But on page 18, this is a really important point. It's the penultimate bullet point, where it says to provide advice and insight to members and senior officers, as well as briefing notes for media interviews. This is catastrophic when people shoot from the lip and share widely inaccurate statements with members of the press, or God forbid, live TV. And then we're left with egg on our face. We're left as a local authority looking thoroughly stupid. But our comms team are the experts, and they're there to help and guide every one of us as elected members. They're not at the beck and call of Cabinet, Mr. Chairman. They're there for everyone, and they're only too happy to provide briefing notes if you're asked to do any kind of interview, whether that's with print journalism, social media, radio or television. So please make use of that. The next point is on page 23. Sorry. On page 23, it was just the last paragraph on page 23 to reassure you that Sean and his team are in the process of developing very good working relationships with your cabinet, and they already have them with senior officers, and they are really, there's somebody there 24/7, so there's no reason anybody should be left high and dry. There's always somebody on call, and they know how to contact us in an emergency or if something presents that we didn't actually expect. And then lastly on page 25, and this is something that I know frustrates a lot of elected members. I'm looking at the 4th bullet point down, where our comms team will engage with broadcasters and reporters to help shape stories. That's important, but also to prevent or correct any inaccurate reporting. That's important too, and very often we are picking up the pieces after the fact. You know, there's a great saying in journalism, and it's I'm sure you've heard it, Mr. Chair. A lie can get halfway around the world before the truth has put its shoes on, and unfortunately with social media, that happens nearly every day of the week, where somebody sets a hair running with a completely inaccurate or misleading story about this council or about our town, and it's important that we fact check that and put it right. And it's important to have that relationship with our reporters so that they're willing to correct an inaccuracy. The last point I'm going to speak to is page 26, which I've covered before, and it's just once again to say that media training is there for you. It's the 4th paragraph down, so do please take advantage of it. The Cabinet has already had one training session. We've already asked Sean to do a second one, more specialised one, and we look forward to that, but it's there for you as well. So, Mr. Chair, I've gone through that quite quickly, and no doubt your committee will have other points that they've identified in the report, which Sean and I will try our very best to speak to. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, everyone.
Any members of Council Pearson?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to go back to what the leader said about working with the comms team. The comms team, I'm sure, must produce a 3 or 6 or 9 month schedules of the type of media coverage they're going to do. It would be interesting if we could get copies of those so we can see what sort of things are going to be happening, and we might be able to contribute some information towards them. Because in the business I worked in, my comms team always used to produce a 12-month media plan, and there was social media in there, the PR, all sorts of things in there. So if we could see what sort of things is coming up in the future, members, council members could actually say to the comms team, look, that particular subject there, I know something about that, or I can input into it, or I can give you something extra. Point 1. We see the press releases when they go out, and I read them and I think, so if I knew what those press releases were going to say before they went out, I might have been able to contribute. So those two things are linked. It's all right saying the comms team are there for you, but I think we're there for them as well. And I think we need to have that information so we can input into them and make their job easier. There's 30 members of this councillors, and we've all got something to add, I'm sure, to help them do their job even more efficiently. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Pierpoint. Your first point, I will ask Sean to issue that media plan to all members. I'm happy to do that. Your second point is a little bit more difficult because the press releases that contain quotes are usually from people like yourself as chair of BTAC, chairs of scrutiny, and your portfolio holders. So that's generally how it works. Now, for Sean and his team to start sending something around the entire council, that becomes unwieldy. So I do see the purpose in going to someone who has a specific role and asking for their comment so that that goes in the press release. Now, I will just clarify one more thing, Councillor Beaumont, because I believe it might have been you that raised this in training, that you didn't receive notifications when portfolio holders or chairs did media interviews. Someone asked for that because it normally just gets circulated to Cabinet. And when that got fed back to me, I asked Sean immediately to make sure that all that information was made available to every member of this council. So we do want to work with you, but it has to be in a way that makes sense for the team and doesn't present lots of additional work. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair. In the past, with every new session, the corporate strategy has been reviewed and hopefully improved or made more relevant. Now, are we going to have our own corporate strategy for Boston, or is this all? Do we take it that this group strategy is all we're going to have? We're not going to have anything specific to Preston.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Austin. This is very specific to media and communications. This is a media strategy. The corporate strategy you're talking about is a much wider piece of work. Okay, that's on our schedule to look at. However, we've only been in administration for 8 or 10 weeks. We haven't got there yet, but I can assure you that when we do get there and start to look at that work, your input will be valued. It will come through scrutiny before anything's decided. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Pitman.
Thank you. I just have to go back to the media training, if you don't mind. I think it would be more valuable to the members if we had asked what training we want in media, as opposed to the training that we received, which some of us didn't find very useful or we already knew. So I think any future training going forward, I believe it should be asked what we want, and then the programme can be put together and we could actually be coached or trained on things that we want to know rather than what we already know. Just a small point there. And the other thing is, you talked about this resident survey, which is a good idea in one respect, but worries me in another, because I get lots of people asking me to do satisfactory surveys, and there's no incentive in it for me. I'm not going to bother. And also, if I'm one of these people that's a constant moaner and complainer, I will give that survey the worst possible ratings and everything that's going, I can hit it with. So I think it's got to be very carefully worded, presented, the content's got to be right. And I think there's got to be some sort of incentive so people will fill it in, give you proper, genuine responses, and you can make some sense of it rather than getting something either very negative or something very strange. Just a small point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Beaumont. So your first point on training is a point well made. Sean and I have had long discussions about the training that was delivered, and I think that I got responsibility to take here and apologise, because I don't think I conveyed that message strongly enough. It's not his fault, it's mine. But he's assured me that going forward, if you come to him and say something like, I really feel a benefit from doing a camera interview, with you being the interviewer and me being the speaker, he's going to arrange that. He's assured me that can be set up with very little trouble. And I think something like that actually can be a really good team building exercise. You can have fun with it, you can make mistakes, you can laugh at yourself. So I think that's certainly something that we're going to look at in this sort of after the summer holidays. Your second point, I 100% agree. A survey can be a double-edged sword, and they have to be drafted very, very carefully. But we all know what can happen, and we can mitigate that with again having a bit of a sense of humour, I think. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other member?
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to highlight a few issues from Councillor Pierpoint's point. I haven't actually had media training, so I don't know what it would look like for a basic training to happen. So, and obviously, so there's no point in actually kind of saying that, you know, we didn't want that, and, you know, what if they're available kind of, you know, for the further training. And also, going back to Councillor Dorian's answer, I think we probably, I mean, especially for me, with I'm autistic and I wouldn't really know what is not available to actually think anything further on that topic. So that basic training is really essential, at least for me. And I hope that would set a good precedence if that happens. And second point was, I'm supposedly chairing international link and train committees. And I think there is a real potential for those things to be aired in terms of media coverage or something. As of now, that committee hasn't had any meeting for many years, and it's a defunct committee. So that is something I would like to take up on. Regarding the drafting survey questions, and with my training, I'm a consultant psychiatrist, and I mean, with the research and surveys and, you know, design and execution. And I think that is something I would like to actually input, but I don't know whether the scrutiny committee members are allowed to design the surveys. So that is something, I mean, I'm quite prepared to help out, but I don't know in my capacity as a scrutiny committee member, whether that would be appropriate to be part of designing a survey. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Arayama. That's a second last point for us. That's a very generous offer. Thank you for that. And I know that, well, I know that Sean would really benefit from your wisdom and your experience. And I'm pleased to say that if this strategy goes live, we'll be looking at about 9 or 10 months' time where we'll need to draft something so that we evaluate after a year. So thank you. And yes, there absolutely is a role for you in that. With regard to your International Links Committee, I appreciate we've had the conversation. It's been a defunct committee, and I know you're really keen to get that up and running. And there will be a role for comms in that to make sure that the work that you undertake will be promoted. And as to your own media training, it's that old saying, you don't know what you don't know. And so I'm happy to have that conversation with you, and Sean and one of his team would as well, just to give you a brief overview of what is available, and then you could always, like a menu, choose what you think is most appropriate for you. Does that make sense? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I've just got anybody else for go on? No? Councillor. This one. Yeah. Councillor. Yes.
No, I'll wait.
Councillor Danny, then Councillor Woodley.
The only thing, thank you for, I mean, it's nice to see this. It's a very good step for us to go forward, which is anything you learn is good for us. I mean, I'm very pleased to see that. I just want to talk about communication with outside communication, basically with the public. Is there any special training with that? And, you know, sometimes we make like very tough questions. Sometimes we meet people which is they are very angry. And is there any training that we can have so we can at least face the public with the truth, with the transparency, and be more honest with them, because that will give for us a good bridge as a councillor and as a council on the top of that. Is there anything like that?
Yeah, so thank you, Councillor Danny. Speaking to what I just mentioned there about the actual setup of being interviewed with a camera, watching it back on the big screen, having a bit of a giggle at each other. You know, you would have to be a safe space. You'd have to be comfortable with your fellow councillors who are training. But Sean can speak very wisely to what the Americans call a pivot. You know, where you're asked a very difficult question that you don't necessarily want to answer. You want to sway it round to something that you want to tell the general public. But yes, he's got all that covered. And I think before any future training, Sean and his team will make sure that what they're about to offer, what they're going to present, is exactly what you want. And you'll be given the opportunity to tweak any training course to suit your needs.
Can I come back to the leader, you don't mind? Yes. There is one thing, as all we know, as all we know, the media usually twist the words for their own good so they can sell more paper or more things. So how can we deal with that in a relation if you talk to a journalist or anybody who comes just as friendly, put a question, you answer honestly what is there, and then you found a different thing in the newspaper, for example?
Well, that's covered in this report that I mentioned earlier, where the team have a good relationship with print journalists. I've had experience of that, where a local democracy journalist has actually edited his piece online. It's more difficult if it goes out in print, obviously. They're very reluctant to issue a correction the following week, but if it's online, I have had things edited to reflect a more accurate picture. And of course, one of the first things I learned from Sean's team was that if someone rings you unexpectedly, never ever respond immediately. Say, I'll take your number, I'll call you back. What is it you want to know? What are you going to ask me? And that gives you time to prepare your thoughts, write down your responses, and then you can be very clear when you actually give that interview.
The recording itself. Councillor Woodley.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for allowing me to speak. I'm interested on page 13. Is how we plan to do it, and I think it's probably a question for Sean. And the last line says exploring new technologies such as ChatGPT and emerging methods and theories such as behavioural psychology. There are some concerns about ChatGPT. You could say that it can be absolutely outstanding and producing all the right stuff, or it can produce absolute garbage. Because I don't know how it works. I'm not a technology expert. Sean is, so he'll know the answers. Well, I hope so. But it does worry me about this. ChatGPT is being used very widely by young people. I know some schools are using it to create their, their services and all sorts of things. I'm not quite sure whether it's as reliable as perhaps we might believe it to be. We have to be very careful with new technologies. Make sure that we actually don't make any glaring mistakes. And as for behavioural psychology, I'm no expert on it, even though I've been a teacher for years. So perhaps Sean can allay my fears, maybe. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor, for that question. Yes, take your first point around ChatGPT. We have absolutely no inclination at this moment to use that type of technology.
Can you speak to the person who?
Yeah, sorry, apologies. The strategy really makes it very clear that we are going to be looking at emerging technology, and ChatGPT is an emerging technology. We should be looking at it, not necessarily we should use it at this moment in time. As you said, it's a very new technology and has its issues. So I think as long as we have one eye on emerging technology, that's fine, but we have no immediate plans to use that for the reasons why you've just outlined. In terms of behavioural psychology, and that's something that really underpins all communications. The whole point of communications is to elicit some sort of behavioural change, and that's really what sets out in the strategic communication that's around change of behaviour. So it's going to be general advice, so we can talk more about that if you
I would like to add a bit to that, if I may. ChatGPT, if it is put on a free, without any rates, then it becomes a problem. But if people are behind that, and it's very useful to actually collect information, collate information if we want to look at something, instead of, for example, going on a literature search or something. So it brings you all the information, but you are in control of how to process that information ultimately. So that person is very, very important, for a group of people. About the behavioral psychology, I mean, a lot of behavioral psychology techniques and psychometric techniques are actually used in our everyday communication strategies and styles, and drawing up a survey, for example, psychometrics. So I don't think you need to be worried about that. We just need to make sure that there are people who are in charge of those things rather than machines or computers. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. I think that's helped me understand, perhaps all of us understand what it's about, and reveals that there are some protections against the misuse of electronic data. There is garbage out there, and we don't want to fall in the trap of making up something you think it's factual, and you find it's fraudulent. But I think our experts and Beth will probably protect us from that. You'll protect us, won't you? Thank you very much, Sharon, and thank you, actually.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sometimes which is I have to give an example, and I would like to have your help. I mean, you are experts and the leader, just more now training than us. There is one thing which is I will give an example. I mean, I think last year the council was talking about the green space, which is now we have some money coming, a fund from the government for the NHS development, as far as I'm concerned. And a lot of customers, mine and local public, they ask what's happened to that. And to be honest with you, the only thing you can give the answer is that we need the 650,000 pounds for the group, something for the NHS, which is we need. Okay, it's the town in need of it. But some people they don't buy that kind of explanation. So probably what I can suggest, not to be in that situation for us as councillors, I think if we have some sort of communication, I don't know how big is our communication with the public through probably social media from the council. I know there is an Instagram page, which is sometimes they have something on it. And probably that one will protect us and give more explanation to people in a broader way, and they can get to this information much more easier than, being on that stage. And that will help probably our communication with the external world, which is our residents. And that's what they need. If we can, I don't know if it will be appropriate for us to give them this information, then we don't have that kind of a backlog to answer every question, because sometimes it just gets you stuck. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, specifically, you raised something that's not to do with the strategy per se, but just to answer your point, the council, I was asked about the P21 project, and I shared my frustrations that we seem to have talked about it for a long time without seeing shovels in the ground. And so it's difficult for the comms team in that situation, because when something's been announced and then there's an update and then here come the plans and then it stagnates for a little while, it's difficult for the comms team to know how to approach that. How much information do the public want? I take your point. If your residents are feeling frustrated that they're not sure what's going on, then we can arrange for a press release to bring people up to date with the current situation. And actually it might tie in quite nicely with the decision made by yourselves at full council to accept the funding from the NHS to scope out a new facility there. So happy to take that on board.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Looking at the monthly evaluation report, I'd be interested to know how this is going to be presented. Like, what is the content? Will there be a value of any of the coverage, sort of in pounds and pence size? I know it's probably difficult nowadays. In years gone by, you could always sort of gauge what sort of coverage you have by looking at content to be this sort of thing. That shows my age. So if you could give me some idea of what the valuation report would look like, what the content is, it'd just be interested to see how it's going to be presented to us. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. I think that's the holy grail of what you're asking for effectively, because usually, traditionally, from a communications point of view, from an output point of view, you're exactly right. It would be Facebook impressions, it would be X amounts of press releases, but the whole point of this strategy really is looking for that holy grail. It's all around what our impact is as a communication team on the organisation. So we're talking at the moment with our different departments about how we can look at that two-way conversation to get some of that value out. So, for example, we talked around PE1, we talked around certain projects. It's only with working with different departments can we get data back from them to understand how we have impacted on that service, which has then in turn impacted our residents. So it's everything all in contend with one. The first point in terms of metrics around social media and traditional print media, no problem working on that. We'll get that. That's literally in trend for a matter of weeks. The issue around, and we also reference data as well and insights and data from different departments. It's going to be very hard and challenging for us to do that in the short space of time. So that's a cultural change that we all need to enact and all need to do. And it's something that we're getting wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. It'd be very interesting to see what it actually says, because I think we'll learn something from that, just to sort of see how the coverage has gone. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay. Before I deal with the report, or comment on the report, there's one thing that occurred to me during the conversation, where I know Councillor Pierpoint suggesting to Councillor Aramba, was maybe if councillors are willing to provide to the communication team some idea of their background and some of their specialisms and skills. Because if you had that sort of data and you knew something was coming up, you know, somebody wants to be a county cricket player or whatever, then there might be some sort of synergy of the two. So that's in a report, I would say I'm really impressed with it. It's to my mind, it covers, you know, I take on board some of the points that Ida made about some data issues, but in general, the positive is really good. And what it's particularly pleasing two points. One is that it is an outward-facing document, so anybody can see it, and if we as councillors can start to grow with the policy and gain an understanding of how, you know, we move forward. The offer of training is really good, but I think having the point of contact, I remember sort of in my previous existence on this council, where, you know, if I had an interview coming up, I'd phone Andrew Mountain and say, is there any policy that we want to, like, because you can always turn an interview round to what you want to talk about rather than what they want to talk about. And so that would be useful. So having briefing notes available to us if we've got something coming up. And I do think it's sort of symbolic, really, of the change I've noticed since coming back on the council. You know, that we are now much more inclusive with the knowledge we have.
Yeah.
We seem much more prepared to go out and engage.
Yeah.
I accept it's going to be a struggle. I don't think there are easy answers. I do wonder whether there is scope for maybe establishing some focus group in community or something to try and see how we go. The experts more knowledge on that. But no, I do think we do have to move with this sort of openness, because, you know, as the election show, I keep going on, but I will do. As the election show, the people of Boston no longer trust their political class, and we've got to show them by engaging with them that, you know, we are moving forward. We are actually going to listen to what they say, and this I think is really great. But does take everything forward. So I genuinely recommend. Councillor, thank you.
It's just one thing, I mean, after your speech, I just, if, for example, you get a phone call, as you say, Madam Leader, and somebody invites you to an interview in 2 days' time, you'd say, we'll call you at 11 o'clock Saturday morning. Now, how quick can we have the information if there's specific questions? Because sometimes you can ask, you can send me your questions on WhatsApp, whatever, I will read them and I will reply, then we can talk. How quick can we get the information? If it's a matter of days, then if it's like a week, we will have to postpone then the meeting or the interview, whatever. And this is what it's just how long will it take? Will it be quicker? Thanks, Madam.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. It really depends on the situation. It depends on the topic. It depends on who's been asked. Because we do have roles. Everybody individually has a role within their ward. So, for instance, if something happened in your ward that was a catastrophe, a calamity, something very serious that warranted an immediate response, then the comms team would be able to gauge that very quickly and provide those briefing notes, I would say, almost within a matter of hours. and there would be no problem with that at all. If, for instance, you were asked to comment on something that wasn't a catastrophe, that it was just murky journalism, if that's an expression, perhaps I've just made it up. I've got a press, I don't like saying that, but then the comms team would equally, I think, be able to say, actually, we would advise that you don't touch that. It's not in our best interest. There is no role for this council in that topic, and be able to steer you away from that. And we've had occasions where we've been asked for lots of interviews. Me and my team, we've been asked ad nauseum for interviews from reporters around the world, Mr. Chair, and we refused them because they weren't appropriate. They weren't going to serve the council well, they weren't going to serve the borough well, and so we don't feel compelled to take every interview. And even with our local reporters, I don't feel compelled to respond if it doesn't meet my timeline and my project work. And so they have to wait until we are ready to tell a specific story. But I'm not going to jump every time they ask me to, at all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So the recommendation is that the comments provided from this meeting are used to shape the development of the partnership's communication strategy. Members agree with that recommendation?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I just tell the committee, I was on Pakistan TV at the weekend. I didn't tell Sean, I didn't know it was on Pakistani TV.
Which brings us to item 2. Our second item is the proposed procurement strategy, which is on page 41 of the agenda. Portfolio holder Councillor Sandeep Ghosh will present this report supported by Martin Gibbs, Head of Procurement.
Legal chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, good evening, everyone. I'm bringing the report regarding a proposed procurement strategy for SHDC for 2026. That can be seen at Appendix 1. I think you all have that. This report is being taken to all the 3 councils. Following this, it will then be taken to the respective GNA and ENG meetings, and then executive and full council at BBC. A procurement strategy documents how the council runs its procurement function and provides a clear direction on procurement activity for the next 3 years that can be reviewed. Some of the reasons for adopting a new procurement strategy includes the council does not currently have a procurement strategy in place. It is deemed best practice for the local authorities to have a procurement strategy adopted and implemented. To ensure that the council has a clear procurement strategy for the next 3 years, to agree an approach to procurement that maximizes savings opportunities for the council, to ensure compliance with audit requirements, as some of the partner councils include ELBC, have had audit recommendations to update their procurement strategies, and to help support key council priorities, such as sourcing local suppliers, procuring sustainability and ethics. The proposed procurement strategy focuses on key themes from the national procurement strategy. These are showing leadership, behaving commercially, and achieving community benefits. These key themes are further broken down into sections, which then outline the strategy to improve and enhance the procurement service. Some examples of this include developing and rolling out a basic procurement training program for members to assist with understanding the procurement process and the value that it adds. Provide efficient and effective information to local SMEs and micro businesses who are interested in supplying goods, services to the council to ensure the process is as simple as possible for them. There are also elements based on sustainable procurement and ethical procurement as can be seen within Appendix 1. The last element that I wanted to note to you is the proposed definition of what is local. It is proposed into 3 strands. The first being within the boundary of each respective council. The second being within the boundaries of the partnership. And the third being within Lincolnshire or 60 miles from the boundary of one of the councils. The committee is asked to review the procurement strategy and provide any feedback to shape the final strategy. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any members may comment? Councillor Bridgewater.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I ask the procurement strategy, for example, how are you going to invite people to come along and want to, be included in the list of the suppliers? What's the sort of procedure for that? How long are those people going to be with you? Are they on an annual basis or a 3-year basis? I'd be interested to know that. And take those 2 questions first. I've got another one in the moment, see what you're going to say. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So just based on the approved supplier list, sorry. So we don't actually have approved supplier lists. It's something that we tend to steer away from on the premise that we are always open to any new supplier being involved. So we don't favour a supplier for one reason or another. What we do, however, though, is we have a database of suppliers who have been interested in a project or interested in a tender we put out on our e-tendering solution. And every time there's a similar project that they may be interested in, they will automatically be notified of that project. So they'll then be able to look at the documents for that project. So the how long on the database is forever, essentially. It's always being updated and will just increase further and further.
To take another question. If the database is getting longer and longer, you could be writing to 100 people to ask them to do a project for you. And is it going to be the same 3 or 4 companies or businesses that are going to keep coming back to you? You're going to keep you in the works the same people. My concern is you can get a bit clicky if you're not careful. I just want to know, we have a robust strategy that is inclusive for people to either tie down to some fixed prices if they're going to an ongoing project, or to make sure we get the best possible prices and not keep having the same 2 or 3 people giving you the same sort of prices and give them the work, etc. Just a bit worrying at the moment. It's a bit loose to me.
So a lot of the projects high value that we do include open tender. So that's what stops straight away the same clicks as such being involved. So that alleviates concerns there. And that threshold, so for open tender just goes £85,000 above the open tender, or needs to go through some kind of public procurement compliant framework agreement. We also undertake spend analysis regularly on a quarterly basis, and that entails, so we'll look at if there is any clicks that haven't been procured maybe compliantly, that will then have contact with the relevant client officer at the council and then suggest a suitable value for money approach to move forward.
Okay, so what is the difference of what you're doing now to what you're proposing to go forward? How is it going to be tighter, more efficient, more effective, and so on? Tell me what the benefits are and the changes are that's going to make a lot of difference to this council.
Yeah, fair enough. So that is within all of that detail is within the actual procurement strategy. So what I've put in there as outlined in the appendix 1 is so what I feel is the current position of where the council's procurement is currently, and then there's the strategy for the next 3 years to aspire and improve that. But one simple one that's already been achieved is we, as in the procurement contract service, are now managing and maintaining the contracts register. That was something that wasn't done previously, and that causes massive benefits because we can be much more proactive instead of firefighting. So what that involves is, so say a contract was going to end in 12 months' time, we'll have a trigger set. So within the team, say 6, 9 months or 12 months, depending on what we think is the the importance and mobilisation of the contract. And from that, we will then contact the relevant council officer, and we'll create that dialogue and put procurement options analysis in place, so we can do that much more proactively instead of being reactive to a service need. So that's So another example is creating risk registers. So we're proposing to anything above £85,000 work with the client council officers again to put a risk register in place, because we think it is really important and probably sometimes an oversight. You run into a project really excited once, but then you don't think about all of the potential risks at the start, and I think that's something that's really important in review. And then another kind of key benefit to our service, which is outlined in the strategy, is contract management. So we'll be working much closer with the day-to-day contract managers, let's call them, to more effectively and efficiently manage contracts, and that includes looking at innovation and continuous improvement, not just purely performance. Performance is really important, and I think that also needs to be included. But we'll have a standard agenda items which will include performance KPIs, SLAs, but also the innovation, continuous improvement, and social value piece as well. So there's some examples, but happy to take offline or have separate discussions either way.
Very well presented. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's very important that I think we all agree it's important to use local suppliers as far as we can, and also to encourage local suppliers to engage with the processes that they have to go through to land a contract. Now, I'm sure, especially with newly developed suppliers, and we need to be encouraging new businesses to come along. And I suspect that very often they're a little bit put off by the basic requirements that are required by our contracts, whether it be health and safety, diversity policy, these sort of things that they would normally deal with on small local contracts. But I think that we ought to be encouraging engaging newer suppliers to help them and guide them to enable them to engage with our contracting. Can you sort of explain what you're doing and what your policy is in this way?
Yeah, no, great question. So based on the early market engagement, we've got lots of different things on the go. So that ranges from we've aligned our contract procedures already to note that, so people need to be contacting and looking to get local suppliers to quote. So that's already in the aligned contract procedure rules. But with regards to actually engagement, so one of the key salient points that we're looking at, which will be an action plan from the procurement strategy, is on a monthly or bi-monthly basis, depending on how successful it goes, is we as a procurement team want to kind of step away from what we call our day jobs and actually give local suppliers an opportunity to either we go to them, so they're in their comfortable space, because sometimes what happens is we'll show them how it's done on our computer. They've got a completely different computer system within their offices, and what we've done is probably confusing more than anything. So that's one element, is to go to their safe space, their offices, to offer support there. Vice versa, they can always come to us. But that will include all sorts of support, because we appreciate that the process is more difficult than it needs to be. And so a great example of that already is we're simplifying those processes. So an example of a tender that we saw, so a renewal tender, not for this council, but for one of the others within the partnership. It was an 120-page document to start with, and the value was not that great, to be honest. I didn't think it warranted that many pages to be in it. There was a lot of duplication. Me personally, if I was a supplier, a small supplier who was working silly hours anyway to put that and had to look at this tender, I would have just ignored it because it's too long. And what we actually saw in the end is we ripped out a lot of it. It ended up being like a 30-page document. And what we also do is we split the documents down into, so this is your specification as such. So if they know what they need to look at, and if even if it's an SME, they may have like 3 or 4 different people. They might know that the person who wants to look at maybe the standard terms and conditions of the council, that could be person A, but person B might be the person who wants to price it and look at the specification. So we're trying to split it down into separate documents to make it a lot easier to follow. So there are a couple of examples, and then you've got the bits and pieces that we're always willing to do, like the meet the buyer events and your business breakfasts. So we're always willing to, if we're invited, go to business breakfasts and present to people on how to sell to the council, and we call it myth bust. So we'll bust those myths of, it's not impossible to get on the books of the council as such. There is processes, as you mentioned, the health and safety, etc. But we are here to support, and that's the kind of the first and foremost is where we're going to. So yeah.
I just wanted to clarify a couple of points. So rather than, sorry if I get it not clear. So you mentioned about the procurement strategy, and you would like to kind of, the number one would be the, your own council, and number two, and neighboring councils and so on. So would that actually make the competition? Instead of doing that, could you not avoid discretionary points rather than making it a kind of a ring-fenced thing for your own council? Because there could be other councils or other providers which could give you good competition prices, good probably is ethically sourced, probably more sustainable rather than what we could offer. So would there be a kind of a system where you avoid discretionary points? You encourage people to kind of participate in the tender or whatever, and then choose by means of giving extra points to the local ones rather than not allowing them to participate. Sorry, I don't know whether you already have it.
So yeah, what is local definition is kind of going to bring together, and is what I'm hoping for the benefit behind that is we can then at the end of this financial year bring a report through to say so X percentage of suppliers we use in, say, let's call them tiers, so tier 1 within Boston Borough Council, and then tier 2 within the partnership. I think because it will be based on postcodes, I'll not note it down. I don't believe we can probably report on the tier 3 currently, because we're suggesting quite a large one. So we're not actually omitting anyone from quoting, and we always look for the best value for money. And so if that means that the local supplier, and that does happen sometimes, is £40,000 more expensive and their quality submission is not as good, we won't offer them the contract just based on their locality. We look at the wider picture. That is purely for reporting, so we can share. If there's only 20% for tier 1, spent within the local council, that could be a problem for yourselves. We might want to improve that. We might want to amend our strategy in a different way. So that's the rationale behind that.
The idea is to encourage the local SMEs anyways. But again, the price is important. We really can't go to many local SMEs, which is very expensive compared to if it's something we are getting national circumference.
So would the discretionary point system be better in terms of, because you wouldn't know which one is, what weightage is going to be given to the local ones. Just being local, how much weightage should you be giving?
Again, it depends what kind of project it is and all those things. So definitely need to do a bit of a research about the company, so we are contacting. Then, yeah, then we can take a decision. It depends upon project to project basis, really.
Another point, in the, it says, two separate strategies, one for the councils and one for PSPS. So would you actually?
So the strategies have been just split out, so, but they are very much aligned. And when I said the only difference within the PSPS strategy is, so the section where it says engaging councillors, we as a LATCO have a board instead of members, so that is the main difference. It is just so yeah, the whole, because we're working kind of in an aligned approach here, it's the same except from that one point.
So you wouldn't be asking us in terms of what needs to be done. You would decide. Sorry.
No, so yeah, the PSPS procurement strategy has already been approved by the board. And that, yeah, it's the exact kind of same process as this. Like I said, the only difference is if it's a PSPS procurement that would be going through, it would be a board decision potentially instead of a member's decision. But yeah, very much the same document.
Just as a point of information, I'm a board member here. Yes. Councillor Welbury and Councillor Denny and Councillor Dick.
I'm just interested into the council. Haven't seen that.
Yeah, so there's no.
I'm just thinking that in the council to just review, such as the padding, the rental.
Yeah, no, good point. As far as I'm aware, there is no ethical policy on a wider note. So we as procurement professionals have to every year to ensure that I'm still part of my professional body SIPs, complete an ethical test essentially once per annum, which yeah, that's one part of what we do. And we work. There's lots of things as is in the appendix that we're proposing to put together. But the simple answer is no. There is no separate ethical policy in place as far as I'm aware.
You think we ought to think
No, yeah.
certain sectors, such as building sector. It's something the council is best for. It could be a potential time bomb to employ the wrong contractor.
It's something I'll look at and we'll take away most people think.
That would be great.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Thank you very much. Councillor Denny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few questions just to let you know. From my understanding of procurement, it's probably reducing cost and creating new supplies. Then some companies use like defense, offense, and all of these things when you read about it. My first question is, how influential is your department in decision making?
So yeah, very good question. We are predominantly a support service, so we. I would like to say we are influential. We are getting more and more influential as we're building trust with our stakeholders, which are our client council officers. And what that means is, they come to us asking for professional advice. That is exactly what we offer. So if they've got something, for a contract value of £100,000 and they wish to, maybe go down the framework route, we may query that and challenge it and say, is that actually value for money? If you've got, what are your timescales? Can we look to do an open tender? So, yeah, I would say we are influential within the councils.
Thank you. Can I come back, Mr. Chairman? My second question, and probably Councillor Richard Austin and Stephen Woodley will probably support me. This is my third term on this council. I met you before.
Yeah.
Now, there's things which it worries me is one of the things which we have, I think, in our legislation is the exemption rule, which is given for the monitoring officer.
Yeah.
So it happens last year that we have this fiasco with Christmas tree, and it was passed under the exemption rule. and most of the councillors weren't happy. I wasn't happy at all about it. Now, my question towards that, how transparent that tender, when you put things for tender for any supplier, services or goods, whatever, how transparent are you going to be with the councillors? Because, as I say to Madam Leader before, we are at the mouth of the cannon. So we always face the public, and I would like to see how transparent we can be. Thank you.
What I'd like to say first is the exemption process has changed. So it requires a much more rigorous sign-off process now. So just an example, it's a 4 sign-off process and 2 of those are councillors. So Councillor Ghosh next to me is one of those sign-offs as the portfolio holder for finance and procurement. And then how it happens for the other signature for the councillor is the portfolio holder for that relevant area. So there's a 2 sign-off process from the councillors, but there's also sign-off from chief exec and sign-off from section 151. But that also includes myself as head of procurement contracts putting comments in prior to that going to sign-off. So whilst I don't have an approval or rejection per se, because I don't work directly for the council, I can sway or say to Christina, section 151, these are my comments. You're welcome to override them. That's completely within your remit, and you're able to sign this off. These are my comments, and that'll be saved there. That's what I'll be putting there. So it's a much more rigorous process than it was before, when it just had quite a simple, straightforward sign off.
Okay, just one more thank you, Mr. Chairman, because I remember the last time we had a meeting with the Councillor Yvonne Stevens. I have a question for you, because you say that your company, PSP, is going to increase probably the pay of the contracts, or you will be leaving somehow, if I may not be mistaken. Are you still on that course that everything is settled now between the Boston Council, whatever, and the councillors?
Yeah, everything's settled. We're providing service. We have been since April, So hopefully it's going well. I believe it's going well. So
that's fine. I just want to be ready.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Tiffin.
Thank you. My question is quite delicate actually, but having been involved in procurement myself with not only millions of pounds and thousands of pounds, I've obviously had experience with some of the problems that you can have with procurement. What safety measures are in place that suppliers don't get too close to managers, officers, procurement officers, where it becomes difficult for them to operate? Because in the past I've had those issues where suppliers want to get too close to you, too close to comfort. And you've got to have some sort of measures and safety measures in place, just in case you've got people breathing down your neck. Thank you.
I like that question.
I do.
The good part of where we work, the way we work as a public sector organisation, and it being taxpayers' money, is that we are heavily scrutinised, and we've got there's public contracts regulation, so we can never continually go with many contractors for a long time. We generally have to open the market up relatively regularly. So that's one way to do it. But what we also have put through, and that's this within the strategy, is declaration of interest documents and forms. So we'll have those contacts in where, and this is kind of upfront. So before a tender, before somebody reviews tender submissions, if they're aware or have a family member or have a conflict with supplier out of 3 who they're going to evaluate tender, they'd have to bring that forward, so they wouldn't be able to evaluate the tenders just because that is a big conflict. So that's one element of kind of stopping things kind of up front with putting it in. So I appreciate your question. Kind of moving forward, what happens if you get to year 2 and there becomes a bit of a close relationship between a supplier and an officer. So from a procurement contracts perspective, contract management, we are going to be attending meetings, contract review meetings, so we don't have to go to every single monthly meeting or quarterly meeting, but we'll go to maybe a formal review meeting. The less key contracts, but for the key contracts, will be at every single meeting. And then I have to take on board your question. So what if we are the ones who are getting close? So again, as Councillor Ghosh mentioned to me, that the ethical part of us, that is completely against everything we do, against the stipulated conduct. But also, we generally don't have someone who sits on the same project. We're quite flexible, so we've got a team of 7, and we're happy to move to different, so say if someone, you'd have a regular project, but say if someone was on leave, somebody else would pick that up. If the meeting wouldn't get cancelled, things carry on because we have got that resilience. So I'd like to think we've got enough measures in place to stop that from happening.
I find that very reassuring. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Ross.
You again, Chair. Do you ever engage with the parish councils? Sometimes parish councils have quite big contracts to do, for example, the play area is quite an expensive job these days. Do you, Lauk, of course, are one of the governing but they give guidelines to parish councils. Do you engage with Lauk as well as parish councils?
We don't know, so we just run service directly to the three councils. But if any parish councils have got any help, then I'll just do a bit of a selling point here, and you can send them our way, and we can see what we can offer. Because yeah, I'm happy to help.
Councillor.
It's just more tricky question. I don't know, maybe Councillor Gosh may answer it. It's more to do with money. If I can ask you broadly this question, how much money did you save as an hospital? I'm talking about tender, talking about anything, because some of the things,
Good question. So I wouldn't like to share that right now because we've literally started providing the service officially from April this year, so very new. But there are some savings in the pipeline, and we're working with client officers on procurement savings plan. We've got a savings tracker in place, and we've got forward plans. So we've got some good ideas, but it's kind of watch this space right now.
If I may come back, Mr. Chairman. Yeah. Thank you, Chair Goldman. So would you inform us in the nearest future or the next meeting or in 3 months' time and say this is how much guys we save in this, this period?
I think that should be. I think we need to give them slightly more than a few months. I imagine that we will be getting a report annually or something.
Thanks, Chairman. Thank you, Lydia, for answering my question. I noticed that in the strategy, we're picking up creating a risk register for projects that will be valued at 85,000. Is that just a nominal figure or what? I mean, how do you get the 85,000 as a value for risk? I think I've asked this question before, actually. I think I've been before. So I can't remember the answer to that. Perhaps you can recall the answer.
So the reason behind the 85,000 figure is because that within the thresholds is what sets off an open tender, so that we've kind of aligned those two.
Okay, and the other question, it's really to do with the social value portal. That's on the other page, page 54, isn't it? And it talks here about the social value. Reviewing the possibility of the social value portal, which measures social value in terms of financial and non-financial terms against national themes, outcomes, and measures. What is it? And how does that impact on the competitive value of what we want to buy? So how are we going to ensure we get good value for money if we're introducing a factor which perhaps might mitigate against it?
Yeah, so the social value portal is one of a few. It's called a platform, so it's like a software platform where you can measure and monitor social value from a financial way. And I'll use an example of that just for clarity. So one example is, say a big construction contract is going to offer 3 local apprentices. That would then maybe one apprentice is classed as a financial value of £10,000. That would be classed as a £30,000 financial benefit from social value because the 3 apprentices are being employed on that contract. So that's the rationale behind what it will be. And so how it would work is we include social value as evaluation criteria on a number of our projects anyway, because it is so important. Usually that ranges from 5 to 10% out of the 100% of the evaluation criteria. What this tool will do, and obviously we need to get business case through to the councils to approve it, because there'll be a cost associated for the platform, but hopefully, I think a large benefit on the actual tool and the financial benefits that can be seen from social value. So, yeah, yes, we're trying to pause 2 seconds, sorry. Yeah, we think it'll be really, really good. There's like 3 or 4 different social value platforms. I completely lost my train of thought, Councillor Woodley, sorry. But it's something that basically we're looking into, and it will be a tool that
Can't sit down, not memory committee.
You can use this microphone.
You sit there. Or can't, can it? No.
No.
it'll be a tool that allows us to monitor and measure over a long period as well. So say we have a contract over 5 years, we can have it automates things slightly, so it makes it, because what's probably happening at the minute is people are saying within maybe the 5% or 10% of the tender that's been awarded, we'll commit to 10% of the value, the project value, and we'll give it to you for a local community benefit. But that's that contract management piece again, that naturally people, the day-to-day contract managers are so busy in their day job that that doesn't ever come to fruition. Whereas if we have this tool, we can then, it automates, and the supplier has to update on a monthly basis what they've done and what social value they're committed to as per the tender. So yeah, I really see the benefits for it. And actually today I had a meeting with one of the other platforms, not the social value portal, and we'll look to be putting a business case together to try and put something ahead.
I just want to clarify that social value software and about the social value software. How much is the estimated cost for that one? Roughly.
I genuinely don't know now at the minute, sorry. It's so early on, but that will all be part of the business case. So if the finances don't stack up, then it's something we'll look to manage internally. But my concern with managing internally is that if the 5-year contracts, it will become a spreadsheet that will become unmanageable, to be honest. So it's something we'll figure out.
Would that mean that we won't be consulted on that one?
I suppose it depends on what the value is of that. So there'll be a business case that goes for the platform. That it completely depends on.
So sorry again. I mean, just for my clarity, and who evaluates that tool? Because that's a software which is there any precedence? Is that somebody has ever used it before, or because we have something similar in healthcare. We call it quality of life years and so on. So I guess that is probably similar. Social value, you kind of establish how much value is given to a particular kind of, for example, your example was 3 apprentices. So who actually kind of chooses this? I mean, in terms of idea, in terms of money, in terms of value, value for money.
So it would be a PSPS bit of software. So what we'd have to do is get an additional work request to the change control notice through. So there's a vigorous approval process through that that ends up with the assistant director, the corporate James Gilbert, who needs to sign off. So he needs to be happy with essentially the decision that I'm making. So I'm not just looking solely at the social value portal as you are, but I'm actually happy to take the name of the one that you just mentioned just to see if it's relevant, and we can have if you want to have a discussion after this, or send me an email with the details, that'd be great.
Another thing I just wanted to mention on page 44, you have put climate change and environmental implications of procurement strategy. And so again, how do you incorporate that so sustainability, how do you actually incorporate into what you, in for example, procuring something?
Yes, so we, again, as we're a support service, we'll advise the client council officer who's working on it, but a number of things we can do. So number one, include something in the evaluation criteria, very similar. So that kind of social value board would include sustainability. So that would have that element in there, and that could include maybe sustainable materials. But and that adds to, we wouldn't even have to use that portal. We could also suggest more sustainable materials instead of unsustainable materials.
So who decides on that? Who actually decides on that?
So that would be the client council officer. We would be advising. So we're a bit of a kind of a challenge process. So we'd be saying we're asking all these questions on behalf of, you know, ethical, sustainable, social value for money. We're basically saying why are you doing that? We ask why a lot.
So my point is the councillors won't be able to kind of involve in any of those decisions. Or is that just PSPS? Because that would bring me back to the original question. So what would be the difference if council decides or PSPS decides?
It wouldn't be PSPS who makes the decision either, really. So it's councils who make decisions. So if we're assisting on a procurement of a project for Boston Borough Council, it is a Boston Borough Council decision. So that has to follow their your government's process. Sorry.
Councillor Pitt, appointment Councillor Dan.
Thank you, Chairman. Martin, you said that the PSPS took over from, is it April?
Yeah.
This year or last year?
This year. So I've been in post since October, but we fully set up and went live as of April.
Right. So if you're taking over the procurement contract for the council, did you do an audit of what was happening in the past compared to what you're proposing to do going forward? And if so, what sort of things did you find that really sort of not alarming, but obviously needed some changes? Can you sort of share with us some of the issues that you've had?
So what we've done is, so the current position is kind of pre-us. That's the as and when we saw it, which is that, and basically the main thing that we take home from is the reactiveness of how procurement worked before. Because just an example for Boston, so let's use just Boston as an example. They had procurement support from a different council called Kings Lynn Council. But that was purely just reactive. So if somebody, Kings Lynn wouldn't come and, you know, do the spend analysis or do any reviews or do it, they'd only support on a procurement project if somebody asked them to effectively. So they'd probably pick up a lot of the big projects. But what we've found and we'll now start to tackle is some of the maybe the medium to the small to medium value projects or contracts. I say contracts probably haven't been procure compliant in recently. So that's something we're now picking up with council officers, and that's the support we can do. So it's much more of that proactive approach is to put it as simply as possible.
Are you saying that we left ourselves wide open for problems then? Because obviously the procurement wasn't done very professionally by another council.
Yeah, I don't think there's problems. If you looked at every single council's procurement spend, there'd always be a few bits of maverick spend here and there or non-compliant spend. That's just part and parcel of, I think, you know, somebody having to buy something quite quickly due to maybe urgency, whereas there's a process to do that, but they've not thought of that just on that moment. So that will still always happen occasionally. But it's proactive. Instead of, so I would say the main example is a contract, say, which is finished, where are we now, July, that finishes at the end of this month. If there's a contract that finishes at the end of this month, it would only start to be talked about probably now because people are so busy within the council to do that. Whereas we are bringing it to their attention much further in advance, so it can be dealt with, and we don't have like a lapse period of maybe 3 to 6 months with the supplier where they can pretty much charge us whatever they like because we need them to continue the service. So that's going to be one of the major differences.
Thank you. I think a good procurement system is where it's very tight, well controlled, and everything's managed very efficiently, effectively. And I hope that's what we're having going forward. Thank you very much.
Sorry, that was previous.
Captain Danny, sorry, no.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have just one question, but I want more clarification. On page 53, if you go to strategy and how it aspire to improve, okay, the first bullet point, which is carrying out due diligence checks, financial insurance, etc. On preferred preferred providers prior to contracts being entered into. It's just this preferred, I don't know how I can settle it, because we could, if we have, would prefer certain, probably, company or certain person or some, I would probably say the chosen one or any chosen, companies we want to deal with. Does it make sense? What I'm trying to say? Because it says on preferred providers. So I don't, probably the word for me, prefer a provider than somebody else, is we are just preferring that one. We don't know, because due diligence it's here. So it's part of transparency.
Explain what a preferred provider is, so it clarifies this point.
Yes, probably. So that's what I'm looking for. Could we close, just say probably the chosen one, then due diligence and transparency, and because here we just, prefer someone is really prefer someone than somebody who could be better than them. And that's what I'm coming from. Thank you.
But yeah, it's just a yes, exactly that terminology. So a preferred provider in that sense is the supplier we're about to we're about to award the contract to. We won't do the due diligence checks just like, because we prefer someone because they're making us breakfast or I don't know, something like that. We do. We do the thing by the book. So we've gone through.
It's actually preferred after due diligence, not before due diligence. I think.
So that chosen by basically.
After.
After due diligence.
So the end of all the other bits.
Yeah, the one who was successful, basically.
Exactly.
The successful providers. Yeah. And that's why, because I'm just saying, when you use the term, terminology of prefer someone, is I prefer you than the other one. So it doesn't sound
quite mean that.
Other say it.
Yeah, that's noted, and I will look to make that clearer.
Because I don't want to, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to fall in the gaps when we had, which is I debated in the full council about exemption of something. And when you have the exemption, it opens all the doors for anything to be done. And that's what take it where the terminology should be probably more precise. That's all.
That's what we're here for.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are you happy with the suggestion? So we're carrying out due diligence checks on potentially successful projects.
Yeah.
Thank you. That would be much better.
Wow, that's a good one.
No, I thought maybe you could use shortlisted or something.
Yeah, no. So, nobody else wants to talk, I will again do my two panels. Again, can I actually thank the officer for the clarity of his report and the way he's dealt with the questions from the members. I think you've helped us. We are, I think, now going away with a slightly better understanding where we just had from the straight papers. So that's really good. I've got just, I suppose, one question. So, say we've got a contract running and it isn't running particularly well. How is that sorted?
Depending entirely on what the contract is. But
say it was I'll take not a number of us, but one of our close colleagues who may let housing has an issue with their grass cutters at the moment, where they're not doing it terribly well, and they seem to have not doing it terribly well for many years. And each time we talk, we say, oh yes, we've got a problem with the contract, and nothing seems to happen. So how will our new system help us make sure we don't end up in that situation?
So we firstly we have kind of standard terms and conditions which when has a clear termination clause in it. So if they're breaching the contract, which that sounds like they are, worst case scenarios we can terminate the contract. That is always the last kind of option that we want to get to, because obviously there's a cost associated with then having to put something out to retender, requote. So there's lots of escalation methods that can go in before that. Includes purely, bringing people around the table to start off with and have those.
Your side, or not you personally, but you'd be involved in that. It wouldn't just be down to our contract officer. You would be.
As long as all I'd say is with the caveat is as long as I'm aware of it.
Oh yeah.
If we as the service aren't being made aware of.
Obviously, then that's
yes, but we want to be involved in as much as possible everything kind of procurement and contract. So if there's a problem, and I suppose that's why I keep going with the proactive approaches. I don't want it to become that, I was about to swear, oh damn, we've got a problem. I want there to be that regular meeting kind of 3 or 4 months beforehand, so we can get to, you know, if the grass is starting to be looking a bit long, we can hit that nail on the head instead of it, well, yeah, instead of it getting to that level.
That's what I'm trying to draw out. Really.
Yeah.
Obviously, we need to engage, make sure you are.
Yes, yes.
Your team are,
Yeah, and
are engaged in this as well. You are
happy to,
yeah.
happy to know more about that.
And just to add, and for the future, if they are breaching the contract, probably we might look into not to accept any more tenders from them, probably for 6 months or 1 year, something like that.
So the recommendation is that the committee provides comments, which we've done. I think quite decent comments actually, to shape that plan of strategy. I think to take on board the things we've said. Members in agreement?
Yep.
Yes.
Which brings us on to our peaceful fruit.
No, Martin, well done.
Yeah, no.
Good luck.
There will be one.
So the last thing is our work programme. The event they want to raise, just a reminder that you will be contacting the next short while with some suggested date for our workshop, where we will workshop some ideas in a sort of more open space, where we can work out things we want to look in the long term. Captain, then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just come from what Madam Leader has said before. We can take like training on the media, on face to face, in interviews. If we can create time for that, that will be appreciated. So, because we haven't got anything from the 21st of September.
We have now, but anybody else? Councillor Austin.
Are you asking for suggestions now, or do you
No, I'm asking, yeah.
do you want to leave them until they work?
No, people actually, I mean, we've got a meeting in September. We've actually got one meeting. Obviously, our workshop in August won't really do anything until September. So if anybody has anything they want us to look at, or anything over.
The one thing that seems to be a matter that is a concern is the change in car parking policy. And when is the best time to have this on the work programme?
Yeah, that has been raised with me. I actually took advice this evening from our officers, and actually this is a matter for EMP. They deal with car parking. So what I suggest is if we can just ask if we can just ask EMP if they will be.
I have a strange situation, so I'm now working as a consultant psychiatrist in Pilgrim Hospital, and I do. I mean, previously in my work life, I used to ring counsel for my patients on various aspects of housing or PIP or whatever, and so I find it really. And I'm kind of quite confused what my role is in terms of, because I am the council, I'm part of the council. So I just wanted some clarity, especially with the initial media strategy. So I think I find I might have some interests, conflicting interests. So how do
I
I?
think you're not the president actually is to get in touch with the section 151 office.
Potentially it's someone that.
Yeah, the monitoring officer and arrange to have a meeting then. So if we could just pass the message on to MP about the car parking, and let's say you will be contacting the next week or so. The proposal is for an evening meeting, I recognise that some of our members were. But the idea is that we'll have a meeting where we can just talk amongst ourselves and work out some of the past months over the next few years. Okay, thank you for attending, and see you at the next